Hello, and welcome to the first of the uh, online lectures that we're going to have. I tried to divide this up a bit so that it's more manageable for you. So I've put the whole development of China into two different sections, and then I'm going to do approximately 15 minutes or so lectures for each, so that part one will really have two parts, part two will probably have two parts, and so on. So you don't have to listen to it all at one time. At least that's my hope. So let's talk about this exciting topic of the development in Greater China related to convention venues. First off, what we're going to talk about. In part one, we're going to talk about the current situation of MICE market in all of Asia, because we can't talk about mainland China without first putting the perspective of all of Asia on it. Then we'll talk about the current venue development in Greater China, give you an overview, as some groups are going to be doing presentations on this, so I don't want to overlap with them. I'll just give you a brief overview. Then we'll talk about, in part two, the questions about the future of Greater China's convention and exhibition industry, whether they're the right size and so on. And some current challenges then we'll finish up with regards to Hong Kong and the MICE industry, or MICE destination. First off, let's talk about the growth of MICE in Asia. As far back as 2006, one author stated that the potential of MICE market is shifting to Asia, and I think that's very definitely happening in terms of growth. Now, keep in mind that MICE has been around for a long time in North America and Europe, and as a market segment, the size-wise part of its market segment, it's still relatively new to Asia, so the amount of growth is really quite significant. Some of those indicators of that have to do with, say, Korea has had at least 9 new venues since 2001 being built, and then additions to those even that were built since then. There's an influx of all kinds of venues in Southeast Asia that we'll talk about briefly. Questions become, is there an oversupply, and particularly oversupply in mainland China? There's certainly some places where that might be an argument for that. We'll talk about that. Macau, what's happening there with our neighbor, and where we're going to go to see in a short period of time. And Beijing and Shanghai, where the future is, and I think you'll see that very definitely in terms of where some of the numbers are coming up in terms of future growth. This is a survey that was done for the China Incentive and Business Travel Meetings. This one was the survey done for 2010. I'll also show you some results from the 2011 survey of the conference that I attended back last month. These are planners, buyers, organizers of conferences in China and Asia who took this survey. So, not surprisingly, Asia is way up at the top of the list, but on the other hand, that's a good sign, because that means that essentially Asia is supporting Asia, and that's a very positive thing, because this is where the growth is at. You'll see North America is still up there, though, in terms of its popularity, even with those planning in from Asia. ICA, some of the statistics, again, as you know, I qualify some of those in terms of what they call international meetings, but look at where Asia is. Singapore is #1 in Asia, #5 in the world. Taipei, Beijing, both in the top 15. Then you get Seoul, Hong Kong falls in at #20, and so on. And those numbers just continue to keep rising in terms of where we are in Asian destinations with regards to international meetings. Korea is one of the shining lights, the stars in Asia with regards to convention and events. The growth of event centers around the various metropolitan areas within Greater Korea, South Korea, of course, is evidence here in terms of these photos that you see. And on your slide, you'll be able to go to links to those if you like and take a look at them further. So let's talk about those a bit. KINTEX is a facility very similar in terms of its nature to AWE, Asia World Expo, and that it's an exhibition center in Seoul. COEX is the convention center, and sorry about that. Not sure what that pop-up was. I imagine you saw that on your screens too. But KINTEX is the exhibition center located outside of the city center. In fact, that's one of its challenges. I was there last year. This is the facility as it is now. I gave a presentation there on the growth of meetings in mainland China, actually, to the Korean market. This is KINTEX of the very near future. This is under construction now. It's developing. As you see, it's a rather iconic design in the process, growing in tremendous amount of space for exhibitions. However, there's a couple of interesting points about this. One is that KINTEX doesn't have any hotel rooms around it right now. They're building a hotel, but next to a huge facility like this, it only has 300 rooms. So it creates some kind of a logistical issue. The other aspect is there's no public transportation. There's no subway line out to that location, as there are in other places. So it does create some opportunities, but still, as you can tell by the nature of what's being built, it's a wave of the future for them. Some of the other new venues that were opened, built within the last 10 years in Korea include COEX as the first one up there, which is the convention center in Seoul. If you look at the conference statistics there in terms of space, what you see is COEX and ICC Jeju, which I visited last year as well, are built more as convention-focused facilities. And Jeju Center is surrounded by a number of major hotels right on the water. It's a beautiful location, actually. If you go over to the far right-hand side, what you see is the exhibition-focused facilities, and there you see KINTEX standing out above the others. But you also see that COEX has a significant amount of exhibition space, so therefore it really fits both markets. Other new venues of note within Southeast Asia, KLCC in Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia is one facility that's a good facility, but probably a bit small in the region, but was a big one for Malaysia when it was built. Impact in Thailand as well as Bitech. And then, of course, we have to think about the private facilities, and Marina Bay Sands is a classic example of that in terms of what it's done for Singapore in adding both exhibition and convention space, as well as a full integrated resort type of attraction in a great location in the marina area of Singapore. This chart shows you the overall growth of space. Obviously, China has the largest amount, and that's not a surprise based on the amount of territory, but you see that the growth aspect, in fact, you look at this, it actually shows in more recent years there's a growing percentage, higher percentage growth of other Asia than mainland, but I think that figure does not show in here the China National Convention Center. It doesn't show the China World Expo, in Shanghai World Expo, excuse me, in those figures, and so those numbers may be rising even further in mainland now. So let's talk about Greater China. That's the main focus here, Greater China development. Back in the early 80s, most of the business in mainland China was national convention and events, not international. By '92, there was just one convention and event center of 50,000 square meters of indoor space. 2003 already had jumped up to 16, and with a growth rate of 805% in 11 years, which is a pretty phenomenal aspect in terms of where it's at. You see the UFI figures now, even in 2008, that 84 of the 156 venues in Asia are located in China, and the rest of the numbers speak for themselves in terms of where that's happening. And the Pearl River Delta area, which is GPRD, is where the largest amount of growth in terms of that. And I'll talk more about that in a few minutes. So what's the implication of where we're at? Well, 158 convention and event centers with a total square footage of over 3 million square feet was the figure in 2003. So where does that stand? What does that really mean for mainland China? Well, the question is, where does it stand to the rest of the world? We think of Europe, we think of Germany as being the largest exhibition country with a total of 3 million square meters back in 2002. Germany is a big country of 82 million in Europe, but relatively small compared to even the United States at 300 million, which is the world's biggest exhibition country. But the U.S. facilities are really spread between many different metropolitan areas, many different major cities, whereas Germany has less major cities to concentrate that effort in the process. And of course, easier to get from places to place in Europe than it is sometimes in the U.S. in terms of distance. But at the current rate, what we're talking about here, this is the point of Mainland, that the current rate, China has the potential to overtake both of those two and become the top facility. Predicted in the China convention and event market that ICA predicts it'll be the top MICE destination. Fast growth says 20% annual growth rate. Rich natural and cultural heritage. People want to go and see China. They want to go and see the culture you understand, but the rest of the world finds fascinating. And it's a safe place to travel. Plus, you have all these foreign companies who've now set a base there, doing manufacturing there, doing operations there. And as a result of that, you have really a strong base for particularly corporate meetings. CEI Asia, one of the primary magazines in the field, says that 34% of their corporate accounts picked China as the MICE destination in 2006, becoming the top in the world, surpassing Thailand. So this is where the focus was. ICA SITE, which is the Society of Incentive Travel Executives, MPI, the Meeting Professionals International, both say China industry will be fivefold by 2020. They both see the future there. In fact, MPI feels so strongly about it, they opened an office there in association with the Beijing Tourism Administration. Looking at some of the numbers and projections from 2006 to 2017, you see the top countries in the world. China falls in the top 10, Hong Kong, SAR back at 29. But now you look at cities, and you see Beijing number 3, Hong Kong number 8. Pretty impressive, actually. Pretty impressive for Hong Kong. But we're at that point in terms of the future meeting aspect of it. But it shows where the business is going. International, again going back to the CIBTM survey from 2011, International Association meetings in Greater China. What you should see in this chart is, of those meetings in Mainland, Beijing is obviously at the top. But if you look at the patterns here, Beijing in the UIA figures shows 82 to 79, right? And the ICA figures, 114 actually drops to 98. So Beijing is the largest, but then you look at the growth of Shanghai, 34 to 63, Hong Kong, 43 to 54. So the point that I want to make from this is that Beijing may be leading the way, but Shanghai and Hong Kong have tremendous growth potential and growth aspects even in that short period of time. And that will grow even further in Shanghai, I believe, with some of the new facilities that have been built there. The popularity of cities in Greater China, Beijing, Shanghai, not a surprise, at the top of the list. Hong Kong. This survey I found interesting that they put Taiwan number 4. I think they mean Taipei, actually. This was done by some UK researchers who presented this, and I think they're lumping Taiwan as one whole city, and as we know it's a country, so I'm not sure they had that figure quite correct there in terms of comparisons. What are the driving forces? Why is this happening? Well, demand from the government sector. Okay, the image and economic development is no secret in mainland China. You see what's happening, the government's behind it, high-speed rail, development of infrastructure, all those kind of things. Those call for meetings and from the meeting sector. High-speed rail train conference was held in Beijing at the China National Convention Center last year, for example. So that's growth is there. The government sector has very favorable policies and tax reduction and interest in order to grow corporate meetings. Association meetings, still difficult to do in mainland China. There are a lot of limitations on association meetings in mainland China. We're not going to get into that here, but there is a favorable aspect from the government sector in terms of the corporate type growth. And rapid growth of exhibitions sort of coincides with that, as everyone wants to get into the China market. They all want to have a piece of that pie. they are willing to spend the money to do exhibitions and attend exhibitions in those areas. Of course, in recent years, we've had the international exposure with the success of the Summer Olympics in Beijing in 2008, and then the Shanghai World Expo in 2010 that exceeded its expectations. I think those were driving factors behind the recognition of why everyone wants to come to China today. Wei Liu, the CEO of China National Convention Center, who I've met, had heard speak several times, although candidly he doesn't speak English, and so I only know a little bit of what he said in my putonghua, but he made the statement that government has recently begun to realize the value of meetings. Well, the important aspect of that is he has spoken out very, very loudly about that the need to promote the venues needs to be there, and as a result of his lobbying and his stature, they have included MICE today in the Beijing Tourism Administration plan, and they've even done training sessions that we've done. Some of our faculty here have gone up and done in the industry to further educate and improve the convention and event marketplace in Beijing, mainland China. Opportunities still exist, though. Obviously, the lack of central planning. There's a lot of facilities that are being built where they shouldn't be built, and the ability to plan where they're going to be. Shanghai World Expo doesn't have any hotels around it. You know, those kind of issues become problematic. A lack of marketing research. You know, we talked about the feasibility study. You know, do we do a feasibility study, decide where it's going to be, talk to the markets, interview the people? I think there's a tendency to say governments want it because they know they want the economic benefit, so they go ahead and they build it, and they don't really put all the market research into it, nor fund it. There's an overemphasis on deluxe facilities. You know, a convention, an exhibition center doesn't have to have all the bells and whistles, all the brass and marble that a hotel has, because the conferences coming in, the conventions, exhibitions, they bring in all of that. They bring in all of those kind of things. They decorate it, if you will, to be the kind of facility that it is. So it needs to be functional more than it needs to be deluxe in some cases. Irrational site selection. There's examples of this in the Pearl River Delta. I believe it's in Zhongshan that they built a convention center that basically doesn't bring any business in because they built it in the wrong place, and that's why the average occupancy is as low as 10% in some cases. So it's a challenge, it's an opportunity. I think they're recognizing those issues, but they're still issues. But the good news, this comes again from the survey from CIBTM, the good news is look at where the buyers in China and Asia see the facilities there. What's their satisfaction with the venues? Very high. Look at the number of excellence, 37%. That's a really good kind of thing, good to excellent. You know, we may sit here and perceive sometimes from Hong Kong that mainland doesn't have the same quality of service that we think we have here, but that's changing. That's changing rapidly, and I think you all can be an impact on that. I'm very positive about it. Where are they going in mainland China? Well, we saw that before: Beijing, Shanghai, Hong Kong. But Guangzhou is up on that list. And look at the other cities that you see on there: Hainan, Hangzhou, Shenzhen, of course. You know, we'll talk more about their facility later. Even Chengdu and Qingdao, secondary cities are seeing this kind of growth facility in terms of their interest. Going back to the survey the year before that was done in 2010, you see the Yangtze River Delta being the primary area where suppliers, those who go to conferences, those who pay the money for the sponsorships and so on, where they want to be. Southeast Asia. Even if you look at the rest of, or Southeast China, excuse me, even if you look at the rest of where that goes in the lower aspect, look at Ho Chi Minh City down there in the rest of Asia. And that's, with infrastructure, their percentage potentially grows. They're still working on that. I'm going to stop here, and we'll start with this slide on the next part so that I don't bore you with having to sit here for 30 minutes just listening to me. So we'll stop at this point, and I'll be back with you shortly.